So as we were saying, we may be on the verge of talks. South Korea's president urging the United States and North Korea to ease any demands prior to possible negotiations. The rogue regime is signaling it is open to dialogue with the U.S. President Trump, however, maintaining a tough yet open stance towards any possible discussions. Listen.
We want to talk also only under the right conditions. Otherwise, we're not talking. They want to talk. First time. They want to talk. And we'll see what happens. That's my attitude. We'll see what happens. But something has to be done.
Here with us now is Peter Brooks, senior fellow at Heritage, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense as well. Well, that is an open stance, Peter, certainly from the president. The old saying used to be there's no harm in talking. Is that true in this case?
Well, I think there has to be some conditions before we sit down with the North Koreans, and people behind the scenes are talking about that. One of the key points for the United States is the issue of denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. In other words, I'm not sure it really makes a lot of sense for us to sit down with the North Koreans, who will use it for propaganda purposes to elevate themselves internationally, if they're not willing to talk about their nuclear program. So if they are willing to do that, then there may be some room for us to sit down and talk to them, get a sense of their mind on things, and perhaps move forward.
I don't see a scenario, but you're obviously the expert on this, where they would be willing to do that. Everything I've read or every story I've done in recent years about Kim Jong-un in North Korea has been that he's learned a lesson from the likes of Gaddafi in Libya and others to say, hey, listen, you start giving up your nukes, and the next thing you give up your power and or your life. And that's how he views the world.
Right. I mean, that's the concern. You mentioned Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein. Yep. They may even go as far as talking about Ukraine having given up their nuclear weapons at the end of the Cold War and sent them back to Russia, the Russian Federation, and the situation they had with Crimea and they have in eastern Ukraine today. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of skepticism as they're willing to do it. But we need to lay that out for them. I think the administration's done the right thing about that and said, yeah, you got to come be willing to talk about it. Now, North Korea, as a state, has said that has agreed to denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula going back to 1992. So it's something they should be willing to talk about, but I'm not sure. There should be some conditionality for our willingness to talk with them.
Hey, while you're here, can I talk to you about China for a moment? That's interesting.
Sure.
It's getting a lot of attention today with Xi Jinping, who's the leader of China, of course, and suddenly now the Chinese are proposing doing away with the two-term presidential limit so that man you're looking at on the screen, Xi Jinping, could, well, be there forever. The Xi Jinping is never leaving. Well, what do you make of that?
Well, I think there's concerns about it. I mean, he's only been in office since 2012, so you'd expect he would get a second five-year term. That's pretty normal in Chinese politics, that the president would get a second five-year term. So you got another 5 years at least. But the fact is, they're talking about changing the Constitution to allow him to stay in power as long as he likes. And what I'm really worried about is this sort of a liberal turn. I mean, I wouldn't say China's a democracy by any stretch of the imagination. It is still run by the Chinese Communist Party. But there's a liberal turn in international politics, like in Russia, where strongmen are becoming more popular, more common. I mean, we're talking about 17% of the world's population here in China. And I do think they have the right to choose their government, which they don't at this point. So I think there are some concerns. And Xi has been a competitor of the United States. We have the problems in the South China Sea, the East China Sea. He's a big player on North Korea. We've had some progress in terms of what they've been doing, but not terrific progress in dealing with the North Korean nuclear program, and also their military modernization and some of the things they're doing on the business front that I think work against American business interests and presenting a level playing field for American firms wanting to do business in China.
One of those things we'll just have to watch, as we certainly don't have any say in it, but it is interesting. Peter Brooks, good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.